3 months ago, I watched my manager stand at the front of our conference room and delete a full year of my work in front of 23 people. She called it unprofessional. She called it a waste of company time. She moved her cursor to the delete button, announced that the company was returning to proper efficiency standards, and pressed it. Everything I had built over 12 months disappeared from the screen in seconds. The room went completely silent. My manager looked proud of herself. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. I want to tell you the full story, because what happened in those 30 seconds and in the 6 months that followed is not the story of a woman who was humiliated and then got lucky. It is the story of what happens when someone mistakes your work for files and forgets that the real work was never inside the computer. My name is Layla. I am 29 years old, and 18 months before that meeting, I had joined a mid-sized consulting company called Norfield Solutions as a client support coordinator. The role sounded simple. What I found when I arrived was a company quietly losing the trust of its most important clients, and a manager who believed the solution was to process people faster. I believed the solution was different. That disagreement was the beginning of everything. This is the full story. My manager's name was Diana Voss. She was efficient, organized, and completely convinced that business relationships should be handled the way you handle a transaction: quickly, cleanly, and without unnecessary personal detail. She hated long calls. She hated personal notes in client files. She believed that warmth was inefficiency wearing a friendlier name. I believed the opposite. Within my first few weeks at Northfield, I noticed that the clients were tired, not of the company's services, of the coldness of the service. They wanted someone who treated them like people rather than account numbers on a renewal spreadsheet. So I began doing things that nobody else thought were worth doing. I remembered the details clients mentioned in passing. One client, a man named James, told me during a routine call that his daughter had just started university. 3 months later, I asked how she was settling in. He was genuinely surprised anyone had remembered. Another client mentioned her company was approaching its 15th anniversary. I sent a short note of congratulations. That simple acknowledgement led to a contract extension worth considerably more than the 30 seconds it cost me to write it. Slowly, clients stopped calling the general office line and started asking for me directly. Renewals increased. Referrals came in from clients who had never referred anyone before. The company's client retention numbers improved significantly. When the CEO mentioned it in a company meeting, I noticed Diana's expression change. After the meeting, she cornered me near the kitchen. She said I was turning the workplace into a social club. She ordered me to document every client interaction I had conducted and submit it as a report. It was meant to embarrass me, to drown me in administrative work and prove that what I had been doing was trivial and personal and not serious business. Instead, I spent 3 weeks building the most thorough document of my professional life. Diana called a department meeting 2 weeks later. She said the report would be reviewed as a learning example for the team. I believed, genuinely, that she had seen the numbers and was finally going to acknowledge what the data showed. I was wrong. She projected my files onto the conference room screen and began reading from them, not to praise them, but to mock them. Every personal note I had kept, every birthday remembered, every detail about a client's family, their business struggles, their small victories. She read each one aloud and let the silence after it make the point she intended. 23 colleagues sat in their chairs. Some looked at their hands, some looked at the wall. No one said anything. I sat completely still, not because I was too shocked to move, but because I had already understood, somewhere in the first 60 seconds, that this moment was not about me. It was about her needing an audience for something she had already decided. Then she opened the master client database. She selected the folder containing every record I had built over the previous 12 months: notes, timelines, relationship histories, the invisible structure that had held the company's most valuable accounts together. She looked at the room. "We are returning to professional standards," she said, and she pressed delete. Every file disappeared from the screen. The room was completely silent. Diana looked satisfied. She believed she had just demonstrated authority. She believed she had proven a point about efficiency and professionalism and the proper way to run a business. She had made the most expensive mistake of her career, and she did not know it yet. 30 seconds after the screen went blank, my phone vibrated on the table in front of me. I looked down, an unknown number. I excused myself quietly from the conference room and stepped into the hallway to answer. The voice on the other end was calm and direct. The man introduced himself as the head of client relations at a firm called Meridian Partners. They had been observing the client retention improvement at Norfield for the past several months. They had heard through mutual contacts that the improvement was connected to one specific person on the support team. They wanted to offer me a role building their entire client relations department from the ground up. The salary was more than double what I was earning. I stood in that hallway for a moment. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see Diana still talking, still lecturing, still standing in front of a screen that was now completely empty. I told the man on the phone that I was interested. I told him I would call back within the hour. Then I went back into the conference room. Diana was still mid-sentence when I interrupted her. "I have an announcement," I said. She stopped. Everyone turned. "I am resigning, effective immediately." Her confidence disappeared in an instant. She tried to say something about professionalism, about proper notice periods, about the mistake I was making by leaving a stable position. I thanked my colleagues, picked up my notebook, and walked out. I called Meridian Partners back from the parking lot. I told them yes. I never contacted a single former client and asked them to come with me. I want to be clear about that. I made no calls, I sent no messages, I did not campaign for their business or suggest they would be better served elsewhere. But within 3 months of joining Meridian Partners, 7 of Norfield's largest accounts quietly transferred their business to my new firm. They called me, not the other way around. Because trust does not live inside a company folder. Diana had deleted the records. She could not delete what those clients had actually felt. The sense of being remembered, of mattering to someone, of doing business with a person rather than a process. Norfield entered a financial crisis within 4 months of my departure. Revenue dropped significantly as major accounts moved away without explanation. Emergency meetings were held, consultants were brought in, executives reviewed every metric trying to identify what had changed. Nothing in the data told them what had actually happened, because what had actually happened was not in the data. 6 months after the meeting, I received a call from Norfield's CEO. He offered me a senior position with full authority over client strategy. He said the company needed exactly the kind of approach I had been building. He did not mention Diana. I did not ask about her. I thanked him for the call. I told him I was not available. Then I went back to the work I was building at Meridian, work that was valued from the first day, in an environment where relationship was not something to be mocked, but something to be measured. The best revenge, I have learned, is not dramatic. It does not require a confrontation or a final speech or a moment where the other person is forced to admit they were wrong. The best revenge is simply this: succeeding so completely, so visibly, in a place that believed in you from the beginning, that the people who underestimated you are left with nothing but the consequences of their own decisions. Diana pressed delete on a year of my work. She could not press delete on what that work had built. If Layla's story stayed with you today, drop your city below. I want to see how far this reached. And if you have ever been underestimated by someone who mistook your work for something they could erase, share this with them. Subscribe for a new story every week. The next 2 are on your screen right now.